Tonight, 5 Texas women sue over the state's abortion ban.
And I needed an abortion to preserve my health, but couldn't get one in Texas.
Why they say the fear of litigation is stopping doctors from performing life-saving reproductive care. Plus, arming Texas court officials.
We know that there's going to be violent people possibly in there going through court.
As some state lawmakers push for gun safety reforms, a new bill aims to allow more Texans to carry guns at work. And later, Texas House Speaker lists his parental priorities, the latest push in the legislature to monitor what books are on school library shelves. Capitol Tonight starts right now. Thanks for joining us here on Capitol Tonight. I'm Karina Kling. 5 Texas women are suing the state over its abortion ban. They say they were denied abortions even when their lives were in danger. Now they're asking the courts to clear up the law so doctors can act when medically necessary.
The state of Texas says they want to preserve life by banning safe legal abortions, but I've never felt my life mattered less than it did during this situation.
Doctors in the state now face felony criminal charges if they perform an abortion in all but limited cases in which the life of the patient is in danger. But 2 OBGYNs joined in this lawsuit, citing confusing language in the law that leaves them unsure of how to safely proceed. This is the first time patients directly affected by new abortion laws have challenged them in court. And we want to bring in Elizabeth Sepper now. She's a law professor at the University of Texas at Austin and specializes in health law and equality. Professor Sepper, welcome back to the program. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
These women are not asking to overturn the state's abortion ban. They want the language clarified for when doctors can act. So how do you think that plays out in court?
The plaintiffs are seeking a declaratory judgment that would allow physicians, if they determine there's an emergency medical condition in good faith that threatens health or life, that they would be allowed to act without worrying about losing their license, facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties, or up to life imprisonment, which is what Texas law provides. So what they really want is some clarity around emergency situations that would allow physicians to help people with pregnancy complications.
Well, and speaking to that, I mean, I know you've read the law and there are exceptions to save the life of the mother. So what kind of clarification is needed within the language of the law that would help?
The law has very bizarre language. So it suggests that someone has to have a life-threatening condition that poses a risk to their life or a serious risk of substantial impairment of a major bodily function, which raises a lot of questions. What is serious about a risk, right? Substantial, major bodily function. Can doctors act to save reproductive function, for example?
With these types of stories that we're hearing from these plaintiffs, from these women with this lawsuit, I mean, how do you think this changes the conversation at the Capitol this session and what we're seeing from some of the people that are saying that, you know, we do want to take a look at the law again and clear up that language?
The lawsuit's an open invitation to clarify those scenarios in which Texas lawmakers don't want the abortion ban to apply. And it calls the bluff, I think, of a number of legislators who say, well, the ban was never meant to apply in this way. If that's right, then they should say so. They should amend the language of the ban to make clear that physicians can act in the face of serious pregnancy complication.
How much effort do you think that there will be to do that this session, especially given this lawsuit?
I think the stories of these women are going to make the public sit up, and that some Texas legislators will be interested in doing something here. Obviously, a lot of work to be done. Many bills have been filed on the issue of abortion, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of this, and I know that that was mentioned today, and just the fact that it is the legislative session. I mean, if they do act, if lawmakers do act, does this lawsuit then go away?
Yes, if the lawmakers did in fact act to clarify the terminology in ways that physicians could understand it and clean up the points of confusion where there's contradictions in the statutory text, then presumably the problems around the lack of clarity of exceptions would be gone.
Lastly, I mean, are you anticipating that we see more lawsuits? They were saying this is the first of its kind post this law going into effect and kind of what we've seen in the aftermath of it. What are you expecting into the future?
There are 12 other states that have abortion bans. We know there have been many other people who have suffered under abortion bans, including those who have faced the kind of extenuating circumstances these women have. In fact, the complaint lists a number of really harrowing stories across the country. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more.
Elizabeth Sepper, law professor at the University of Texas at Austin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The state senator who represents Uvalde wants to ban ammunition that expands on impact. This is Senator Roland Gutierrez's fourth round of gun safety bills. He was joined again today by families of Uvalde mass shooting victims to announce the legislation. His latest round would ban what he referred to as kid killer bullets. The highly lethal ammunition is often used in hunting but can be easily obtained at gun stores. He also wants to ensure safe gun storage and close gun show loopholes, which allows a private seller to sell a gun without conducting a federal background check on the buyer.
Currently, in today's law, we allow people to go into these gun shows and buy as many AR-15s as they want without any ID, without anything. How are we okay with that?
Other bills have been filed this session over gun purchase background checks, including bipartisan legislation requiring certain teen mental health records to be passed on to police. While some lawmakers push for tightening gun laws, others are aiming to expand who gets to carry a gun on the job. District clerks would be able to carry handguns to work, but only if they have proper training. And as our Charlotte Scott reports, this bill has bipartisan support.
End gun violence! Many Texans have come to the Capitol to plead with lawmakers to pass stricter gun legislation. End gun violence! But a bill is making its way through the Senate that would actually increase accessibility. Senator Brian Birdwell wants to give district clerks the option to carry handguns in courthouses. U.S. district and county attorneys can already do this.
Defend myself.
John Gimble, a district attorney in Senator Birdwell's Waco area district, says this bill would help him feel safer coming to and leaving work.
We don't have security after hours.
But even though the bill was met with criticism during public testimony,
it's ridiculous, silly, and really not necessary.
A Texas Senate committee voted to advance the legislation. Even Democrats support it.
The reality is a district clerk, sometimes they transport large sums of money and cashier's checks and other things when there is a sale at the courthouse steps. And really, they don't ever get it much of the time. They are not afforded security.
Representative Charles Doc Anderson filed an identical bill in the House. He said courthouses can often be hostile environments.
Divorces or bankruptcy or criminal issues, and they have to work in that environment every day. And on the fairness side, most other folks, court officials, are able to carry, and so I don't see any reason why the county clerk should be able to do that also.
If the bill passes, district clerks would need to pass a handgun training course. That's something the lawmakers and one pro-gun advocate support.
I highly advocate for training, and I think district clerks should get as much training as they can too.
Although she also likes the training requirement, Nicole Golden with Texas Gun Sense says putting more guns in more places doesn't make Texas safer.
That's been a trend for a while, and we've faced escalating rates of gun violence, so I don't know that it's working as a measure to prevent gun violence.
Do your job! A push for more firearm access by lawmakers and advocates at a time when other Texans impacted by gun violence are asking for more regulation. For Capitol Tonight, I'm Charlotte Scott.
Governor Greg Abbott says he's only focused on this year's legislative session and not on a possible presidential run in 2024. The Republican governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis, has all but announced a run with the publication of a new book and visits to key states, including Texas, this past weekend. Our Washington reporter Rena Diamante takes a look at how the two are setting themselves up politically to potentially challenge each other and Donald Trump.
As former President Donald Trump took center stage at the Conservative Political Action Conference outside of Washington, an expected rival for the Republican presidential nomination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis courted Texas Republicans at two fundraising dinners over the weekend.
He picked up on the "Don't Mess with Texas" theme right off the start. and then they actually used to close that at the end. Everybody was laughing that, yes, you don't want to mess with Texas, you don't want to tread on Florida. It would be bad things for you to do, especially if you're running for national office.
DeSantis headlined the Harris County and Dallas County GOP's annual events amid growing speculation he will enter the 2024 presidential race.
So if you're looking for high-powered, deep-pocketed donors among Republicans, you need to come to Texas.
DeSantis downplayed any rivalry with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who is a potential White House candidate, characterizing their two states as allies. In Houston, DeSantis said, "We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. The state of Florida and the state of Texas is where woke goes to die."
What turns it into the conversation about whether or not it's competition is that both of these two individuals are high profile in their state. And of course, Governor DeSantis is acting every bit the presidential candidate.
The legislatures of Texas and Florida are run by Republicans and are at the forefront of passing legislation expanding gun rights, imposing new rules around voting, and taking aim at diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. When one state house leads on one issue, the other follows suit, and vice versa.
There are no bigger states in the heartland, or the old Sun Belt at Florida and Texas, and really we're setting public policy paths that other people can follow and copy.
The Texas Democratic Party chairman blasted DeSantis' visit and warned the policies of the Florida governor and his Texas counterpart threaten access to public education, health care, and Social Security. In Washington, Rena Diamante, Capital Tonight.
2 Americans are in a Texas hospital after surviving a deadly kidnapping in Mexico. 2 other Americans and a Mexican woman were killed in a gunfight, officials said. They say the victims were going to Matamoros for one of them to get cosmetic surgery. That's when they got captured in the middle of a fight between 2 rival cartels. So far, one person who was guarding the victims has been arrested. U.S. officials say they want to make sure the victims get justice.
It's not for me or for the State Department to be prescriptive, but ultimately we want to see accountability for the violence that has been inflicted on these Americans that tragically led to the death of 2 of them.
The Mexican president said the people responsible would be punished. Still to come on Capitol Tonight, targeting school library books, why the Texas House Speaker is prioritizing what students can access. Welcome back. Let's get a check now of some of the other political stories making headlines across Texas. State lawmakers want to increase penalties for cutting off ankle monitors following the deadly shooting at a Dallas hospital in October. The bills would require officials to be notified when someone on parole is allowed to visit a hospital and make it a third-degree felony to assault hospital employees. The suspect in last year's shooting cut off his monitor after serving time in prison for aggravated robbery. He was allowed at the hospital for the birth of his child. As rumors swirl about possible plans for the Texas Education Agency to take over Houston ISD, some state lawmakers from Houston want to help districts stay independent. They filed bills that would provide the TEA with more discretion to handle underperforming schools. The legislation would allow state officials to work with district leaders to address issues to avoid schools closing or additional oversight from the TEA. And the Texas House Speaker is targeting school library books. Dade Phelan listed it as one of his latest priorities and backed a bill that would require booksellers to rate and identify books considered to have sexually explicit content before they are sold to school libraries. That legislation would also allow parents to have more oversight over the books their child can access. We want to bring in our political analyst now. Joining us this evening, Republican Ted DeLisi and the Executive Director of the Texas Democratic Party, Jamara Brown. Good to see you both.
Always good to see you.
Ted, I'll start with you on this. I mean, this move by Phelan comes amid escalating clashes over censorship, over book bans. I mean, how do you see this fight playing out this session?
I really see it as the fact that I think that we can do a better job of identifying explicit material. I think parents know that, and I'm just going to say this, I think that they know that there's part of me that says they know that there's some explicit material in the libraries. They're not comfortable with it. Every time a parent raises it at a school board meeting, they're sort of labeled that they want to ban all books. That's not the case. Let's see this debate play out. But the idea that parents are more involved and that publishers who have explicit material have to identify that, I think this debate needs to happen, and I think that this is something that conservatives care about and all parents care about. I think that the speakers scored getting ahead of this.
Well, Jamar, what's your response to that? And I mean, I guess it's then defining explicit, defining all of these different things too, and the role parents can play in all of this.
Well, I think that we have opportunity here that we need to be listening to parents. We also need to listen to educators. We need to listen to education administrators all over the state because, again, to Ted's point, is that this isn't clear about what explicit means. But what happens if this passes? It also happens that they start looking at the history of other things, right? Other books could potentially fall into this because there's so many loose ends in terms of how this is defined. And so we've got to make sure we fight that. I think that the debate will happen. That will happen in committee. We'll be fighting it. And I think that parents, but also teachers, people who should be experts on the content, should also be part of the decision making, not just certain lawmakers.
Yeah, we've heard from school librarians over this as well, and I know a fight we'll continue to talk about. Ted, I want to turn to the abortion lawsuit. Our top story tonight were 5 women who were, they say, denied abortions, medically necessary abortions, suing the state to clarify the exceptions to the laws. And do you anticipate lawmakers revisiting the language of this law?
I mean, it is the life of the mother issue has been litigated and will continue to be litigated. But I think that the terminology, which your guest sort of identified there about, what is the definition of life-threatening, is something that I really feel like, I've been sort of watching that language sort of evolve very, very marginally. And so I don't expect it to be revisited. And I think one of sort of the interesting things about it, about where we are right now in sort of a post-Roe world, is that, we're here in March of a legislative session, and abortion has really not been a very high-profile issue. And with the exception of these women filing the lawsuits, we really haven't heard a lot about abortion this session. I frankly am sort of surprised, but that is the way it's turned out.
Well, and maybe to that, and you can speak to this, Jamar, but, and as I asked the guests, do you think with a lawsuit like this and with seeing some of the faces of these women who have gone through this, do you think that changes the conversation at all?
Well, I think an important point to make is that you don't hear about abortion in this legislative session because they basically banned it already in the state. And this is why we have this lawsuit because we were told that exemptions and exceptions would potentially be made, but it's become murky water, and we need that clarification now. And what we're seeing now is that this is becoming a public health crisis where there are people who are still in need of services. They're still facing life-endangered situations, as you can hear with the lawsuit. But the laws don't permit for the providers to actually make the judgment call based on their medical experience. So that's how we are where we are.
So the law does allow a medical professional to make that charge. What the lawsuit says is they're worried about the repercussions of making that call if it were peer reviewed. So the doctors have absolutely the authority to say what is a life-threatening condition. The question is they're saying that is not expansive enough. So this is where the line. This is where the line is going to be drawn. It's not going to be drawn in the legislature. It's going to be drawn in the courts. Once the Supreme Court has spoken, it was spoken for 50 years with Roe. Now we're in a post-Roe world. I expect the courts are going to be where this is fought out. I don't really think the legislature is going to take this up, Karina.
Well, and maybe that is the case. We are hearing the 2 OBGYNs who are also part of the lawsuit and some of the confusion that they've said that has been happening within the law.
But how long has it been since the decision came out until this lawsuit? This is an interesting arc. We haven't seen this lawsuit.
The timing of this was talked about too. And guys, we're going to have to leave it there.
Unfortunately, we're seeing the impact though.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure we will continue to see lawsuits and continue to see
There'll be more.
This happens at the Capitol as well. Guys, thank you very much. So to come on Capitol tonight, President Biden proposed a plan to help save Medicare, why it's expected to run into a wall with Republicans. San Antonio Congressman Joaquin Castro says the Department of Defense is dragging its feet on orders from Congress to waive medical debt for civilians treated at military hospitals. Castro and Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to the department saying its aggressive debt collecting practices create an undue hardship for low-income patients. Legislation has been passed in recent years to expand the department's ability to waive civilian medical debt, but the department said it's still figuring out its process for carrying out the policy. The letter listed ways the department can move forward and asked for progress and an update by the end of the month. President Biden says he has a plan to support Medicare for at least 25 years. He's proposing a tax hike for wealthy Americans, but that will be tough to sell to Republicans who have their own ideas. Reuben Jones is in Washington with more.
Medicare is being depleted financially. A government report last year found part of the popular health insurance program for people over 65 will be insolvent in just 5 years. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden laid out his plan to extend the life of the Medicare Trust Fund at least another 25 years.
Americans have been paying into this particular program since their first job. Elected officials, we believe, the president believes, has a duty to ensure this lifeline is available for generations to come.
A cornerstone of the plan would boost the Medicare tax rate to 5% from 3.8% on income more than $400,000 a year, including salaries and capital gains. The plan would also expand the ability of Medicare to negotiate lower prices for high-cost drugs. But the proposal is likely to face hurdles getting through the House of Representatives, which is controlled by Republicans.
Let's do this in a bipartisan, truthful, and honest way, rather than these honest half-truths and otherwise disingenuous rants.
Republicans favor a different approach to stabilize Medicare. Last year, members of the House Republican Study Committee proposed raising the eligibility age for Medicare. The White House says its plan would also cut health care costs for users by dropping behavioral health care costs, capping cost sharing on certain generic drugs like hypertension and high cholesterol to $2 per prescription per month, and decreasing out-of-pocket costs for drugs subject to negotiation.
This common sense step will help millions of ordinary Americans.
Biden's proposal sets up a contrast with Republicans heading into the 2024 election. Biden's plan will be announced in his new budget he'll propose on Thursday in Philadelphia. In Washington, Reuben Jones, Capitol Tonight.
And that is all the time that we have tonight. We're back tomorrow with the latest in Texas politics. Until then, thanks for watching. Stay safe and have a great night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. For more refreshing stories about your community, click the subscribe button over here. You can also download our Spectrum News app and tune in to Channel 55 on Dish and DirecTV to get live news coverage, weather updates every 10 minutes, and more. We'll see you then.